So famous opera singer Renee Fleming recently sparked big debates in the music community when she very directly and very bluntly raised questions about the value of higher education for music in today's culture versus how much it costs. In this video, I'm going to tell you what she said specifically in her own words. I'm going to tell you how the world at large has reacted to this. And then lastly, I'm going to give you my thoughts as a person who has a PhD in music composition from UCLA and now works as a full-time composer for film, TV, orchestras like Juilliard's Music Advancement Program, the Atlanta Opera. I am the director of my own fusion orchestra, Southside Symphony, and many more things. As always, if you enjoy my teaching style, make sure you check out my independent music education platform, musicality.me, but I'll tell you more about that later. Okay, let's hop in. So firstly, I'm just gonna play some of the clips and let you hear what she said in her own words so y'all don't accuse me of twisting anything the woman said. Let's look at that.
Well, listen, given the climate right now for opera performance, classical music performance, which is what I know, I think there are far too many universities and colleges that are taking money from young people who shouldn't be. I mean, I'm sorry. The thing that's, I think, criminal about that is that somebody recently said to me there should be an antitrust suit because these kids will all have debt. They'll all have terrible debt when they get out of school. I mean, and I've given I don't do it anymore, but I have given master classes at small schools, and obviously there's a miraculous talent at some point, but if they don't get on the right track quickly, when they get to your late 20s, it's really a declining kind of possibility at that point. But, when I hear people that really have no business even majoring in voice, but the schools take them. I asked somebody at a major conservatory, how do you sleep at night? I know that was a bit harsh, but he said, well, you know what he said? He said, you know what, a lot of people use that degree to go on and then major in something else. I'm like, wow, given what secondary education costs, that's a bit rich,
How do you sleep at night? She is not mincing words, and honestly, I respect it. I respect taking a bold stance. This came recently in a 2025 panel that was at the Symposium for Voice, I believe. Sorry, the 2025 Voice Foundation Symposium. One of the first posts I saw was this post by Richard Hobson, who goes on to emphasize the value of being a teaching artist. Richard says, the percentage of singers who make their living at only singing has always been small. So it turns out that singers who make a living at only singing are the exception. The majority of us supplement our living in other ways, usually teaching. This is also true for conductors, pianists, violinists, stage directors, etc. I'll venture to say that this may also be true for English, science, philosophy, math majors, etc. I'm not sure that's true, but universities survive this way. It would be interesting to see a study of what percentage of all college graduates are financially successful in the respective fields of study. Ultimately, it's a choice of going to work and loving what you do or going to work and being unhappy. I think that's interesting. We see here Kristen chimed in to agree. Kristen said, on the nose, Richard, I'm still singing at a high level and the pay is good, but it's not consistent. So I teach as well, which I love. And you're right. People in all kinds of professions probably side hustle as well. Thanks for putting this out there. How I understand what Richard is saying, I think it's just because a person doesn't make their primary living off of singing doesn't mean that their mission of going to school for music was a failure. And I don't necessarily think that's what Renee was saying. To me, I understood it that she's just saying flat out, there are people who would never make it as a singer. But before I give my thoughts, I want to jump into this article by Justin Peterson with the title, Renee Fleming Said the Quiet Part Out Loud. So Justin makes a lot of great points, but one of the ones that stood out to me was how he broke down how the cost of education as a whole has gotten way more expensive. And we know that everything has gotten more expensive these days, but we have the stats and the charts to show that it's outpaced things like the cost of living, inflation, housing, even medical care. He also brings in some research to show that it would be one thing if these costs had gone up, but the value of this education has gone up with it. But we also now have the data to show that most of these costs aren't going into the classroom. We're not getting more teachers relatively. Most of this is going to like bureaucratic bloat or administrative bloat, meaning like we're getting like more administrators and managers and things like this in the university system, but not more faculty, not more teachers, not more resources. If you're interested in this topic, you should definitely read Justin's full article. To me, it seems like his main point kind of boils down to the fact that young adults are being encouraged to take on like life crippling amounts of debt, all in the name of job preparation. But like, one, the jobs aren't really there when they get done, and two, they're not really prepared for those jobs. and I don't think he's wrong. He points out about how like musical theater school is kind of like a new and trending thing now, but he says that like those students are being trained in a lot of different styles, which make them more hireable, and opera or more classical voice students are not. I want to give asterisks that like, hey, I do have a PhD, but mine's in music composition. Still in music school, there are little differences, but I would say there are some analogous elements in music composition school as well. He kind of makes an interesting point, I think, that kind of like an unintended side effect of this system is that like you might think that by making the loans available, you're making it more accessible, but within this system, you're making it more exclusionary and more elitist because only the people who can afford to kind of pivot once the main thing doesn't happen without ruining their life with all that debt are the ones who are able to kind of go with this career path. And I thought that was really interesting. In his own words, he says, if the cost of a music education keeps climbing while the return on that investment remains low, only the very wealthy will be able to absorb it. That is gatekeeping in its purest and most elitist form. The ethical issue isn't that students don't all make it, it's that the structural odds are hidden or glossed over while institutions profit handsomely. So what are my thoughts as a person working in the field who also went through a few programs? I'm gonna say, I've alluded to it, but I think Renee and Justin both make very interesting points here. I'm reminded about like how at one of the universities I attended, I went to school with a lot of aspiring pop singers. And I remember thinking about, even at that time, I'm like, hey, I'm seeing them graduate, probably 6 figures in debt, and they don't have like an EP out. To me, that's not okay. I think that's predatory. And while I am a believer that like debts taken on freely should be paid back, I just don't think it's quite right for 18-year-olds to be able to sign up for like 6 figures in debt when they like can't legally buy a drink, or, that they can't get a business loan anywhere. They can take on this debt that will stay with them for life, even if they file for bankruptcy. I just don't think that's really fair. And my career has worked out great, and I'm so thankful and blessed, but I'm not too proud to say that there's not a huge element of luck in that. Plus, I still do have student loans and probably will for a long time. I really like how Justin took a hopeful approach at the end, and he's like, I'm not being cynical about this thing. I do value music education. I do value us learning these tools. I feel the same, and the way he put it is like this. No one is saying institutions shouldn't offer training in the arts. The critique is that the academic model, with its credit hour bloat, general educational requirements unrelated to the craft, inflated costs, and near total monopoly on respectable credentials, is ill-suited to producing working singers in the modern market. A more agile, private sector or apprenticeship-based model could train singers more efficiently at lower cost and with better career adaptability. And I would say this is exactly why I started musicality.me. I want to be able to teach like anything. The first course we have up there is the foundations of beat making. I have a PhD in music composition, a master in music composition, a bachelor's in music composition, and an associate's in music recording technology, and I've never taken one course on beat making. I had to teach myself all of those things. I think there's a gap there, and I think private teachers like that can kind of like fill those gaps at a much lower cost than a university and in much less time. Justin also brought up HB Studios in New York. It's something I'm not familiar with, but he said like basically it's kind of a similar thing where like working artists can teach younger artists like without the bloats of having to take like a math class in between. I'm such a scholar at heart. I'm such a curious student. I think that we definitely need universities to push human knowledge forward, right? And just to create these spaces where we can learn for the sake of learning, for the sake of advancing humanities, for the sake of advancing art. They contribute so much to the world, and I just don't want my words to like be used to support any type of anti-intellectualism. That's the opposite of what I want here. It's just that the cost is just so disproportionate to the benefit right now that I don't think it fully makes sense, and I think we have to kind of work some things out. Frankly, I also just think that, like, as far as I can speak for music, for my craft, I don't think 4 years is really enough to get great. Like, it's not enough to, in a lot of cases, make you good enough to be a full-blown professional. The issue is kind of that a lot of these degrees are marketed as like job training, and I just don't think that's really fair. Like, if it was marketed as, hey, become the best artist that you can, study these artists, or being trained to teach music, that's one thing. But like, when it's being posited as like, this is the job training you do before you get the job, it just doesn't work like that, and the stats show that it doesn't really work like that. I do think it's complicated though, right? Because like in my situation, I flat out would not be a working composer if I did not go to school, full stop. Coming from where I come from, having no connections, having no benefits, having no experience, having nothing, I just wouldn't have a career in music if I didn't go to school. That was my path towards that. So that said, I just think it's very complicated, and I do think there are issues raised here by Renee that I think these are conversations that we need to be having. If you're kind of on the fence of thinking about whether or not you should go to music school, I would suggest watching my video on should you go to music school, and then I also have another one about like why I ultimately chose to make that decision. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Again, if you like the way I teach, make sure you check out musicality.me. If you want more videos like this, make sure you subscribe and like this video. All right, see you next time.